an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
Well, here we go. Yes, indeedy. We are looking at the cage match in Peel. And I know we kind of saw this coming a little bit. Yeah, but not this quickly. It was percolating, but it has bubbled to the surface. And so here we go. Dave Trafford here doing the solo edition of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. The rest of the crew getting all set to take on the long holiday weekend. By the way, Queen's Park is named after Victoria, so this is her big weekend. You can hear her out there on her horse-drawn carriage roaring around the park. That's it. So, we're going to spend this 25 minutes or so this week really kind of digging in on the dynamics here. What was really going on yesterday. I mean, at one point, Patrick Brown accused Bonnie Crombie of being a liar. He said it on the radio. Yeah, I think she's either misleading people or just lying. He dialed that back a little bit as he went through the rest of the day. But it more or less set the tone for how things were going to work. Yesterday afternoon, the Municipal Affairs and Housing Minister, Stephen Clark, stood up in the legislature and made it official. He tabled the Hazel McCallion Act.
Speaker, our proposed legislation, if passed, would begin the dissolution of Peel, and Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon would move to single-tier municipalities over the next 2 years. I expect all of the municipalities to continue to cooperate with each other and with the province to advance our shared provincial and municipal interests.
Well, of course he does. He expects that, right? I mean, let's set the tone. Let's all be adults in the room. Well, it's a bit of a challenge because at this stage of the game, decoupling these three municipalities is going to be a challenge. There are all kinds of big issues, the big things like policing. That's a huge budget item in the region of Peel. And, when you start to look at how all of that's going to play out, against the backdrop of this arcane idea that we have this other level of government, the regional level of government, that stands between the municipalities, Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, and the province. There is the Regional Municipality of Peel, and they have their own council. And I understand why and how that becomes problematic, particularly for a city the size of Brampton and a city the size of Mississauga, because they are both growing. Populations are growing. Their business bases are growing. I mean, for all intents and purposes, fairly healthy economies, relatively speaking, the way things are playing out. And I did talk to Bonnie Crombie, the mayor of Mississauga, at the end of last year. And this was after the election. And I said to her, 4 years from now, when you're running for re-election to be the longest-serving mayor of Mississauga next to Hazel, do you think Mississauga will be on a path to be a standalone city, that is to say, separate and apart from Peel Region? And she was fairly, optimistic that was on her radar. This was going to happen. Here we are 5 months later, and it's happening, and fairly quickly. So, and I get it that, this is all part of the housing initiative. And so if you're going to have the housing initiative out there, you want these municipalities where there's a good deal of growth to be able to push the housing agenda forward at a local level and not get bogged down in regional politics. Let each one of them take care of itself. That on its surface makes sense. But as I said, policing, how do we manage that? Does it say that Brampton, Mississauga, Caledon all now need their own police services? How do we break that up and make sure that they're all properly represented? They're going to have to carry the bill for all of that. And that's a burden for Caledon, right? Huge, if you look at it that way. Patrick Brown, all about the wastewater treatment centers and facilities. Again, critical infrastructure right now happens to be located in Mississauga. Oh, that's a problem. But then you get down to the weedy stuff. You start to think about the Parks and Recreation Department that's managed regionally. You're going to need 3 of those now? Just think about, I don't know, road maintenance on the regional roads. We're going to need 3 of those departments now? Who's going to fill the potholes? Who's going to salt and sand the roads in the winter? Who's going to plow the roads in the winter? All of that kind of stuff. I know it sounds like, oh, yeah, we'll figure it out, come out in the wash. The numbers are fairly significant when you talk about how the taxes break down, how they get, reallocated at a regional level. Peel region sounded like a good idea at the time because you could deal with all of these things at scale. None of the municipalities had the clout or the population to support it. Now they do. But they've gone down the road so far. Well, how do you fix that? And right now, I called it a cage match. You listen to the tone and the rhetoric from Bonnie Crombie and Patrick Brown. They went into the media studio at Queen's Park after the minister introduced the legislation. And the first question out was about, big costs here. Is the province going to make them whole? Will there be tax increases in the municipalities to offset all of this? And that has to be figured out between now and January the 1st, 2025. Patrick Brown, first one to respond.
We need to be made whole for the infrastructure that since 1974 we built in Mississauga to service all of Peel region. And the initial estimates we have from consultants the city's worked with is to replace the water treatment facility in Brampton. The wastewater facility would be $1 billion and $3 billion respectively. So that's $4 billion. We'd expect a cost contribution from Mississauga like we did for the facilities in Mississauga.
So we're only minutes
it'll be significantly
into this debate and discussion after the legislation has been introduced, and here we are, Mayor Brown in there, and you can hear the numbers he's got ready.
Will grind to a halt if we're not made whole.
Right? We got to be made whole. And he lays it all at the feet of Bonnie Crombie and the folks of Mississauga.
Reassurance to us, because it would be catastrophic for property taxes if that wasn't the case. And so it's really reassuring that at the start of this process, the Premier has said that we'll be made whole on what is owed to the City of Brampton.
Minister? So if I may have the opportunity to respond as well. So this is a very historic day. I've been waiting for this day for many years, as has Hazel McCallie, and I know that she fought the formation of the region of Peel and fought Bill Davis 50 years ago, so she's smiling down on us today. So, I've only asked for fairness and equity in this process. I ask that our tax dollars continue to be invested in our city for our growth and infrastructure, our programs and services. And I will only expect, and I know the minister does as well, that same fairness and equity be the principles that move us going forward as we all grow, and we all grow independently so that we are set up for growth. The reality is the infrastructure was paid for by the City of Mississauga when we were in our growth phase, 70 cents on the dollar. And not only does the water and wastewater treatment plant provide for Mississauga and Brampton and Caledon, but also York region. So there is lots of space, and this, in my view, this is easy placed in a utility and managed by an outside board and be a user pay system. And this is very easy to disentangle. So there are a lot of approaches going forward. I look forward to working very closely with the government, but certainly I'm delighted that the minister will be making us all whole. Perhaps it's Mississauga that will be needed to be made whole for the contributions that we have made over the past 50 years during the growth phase of Brampton and Caledon. Thank you.
Can I just ask the two of you, the two mayors, you speak and Patrick Brown makes faces. Patrick Brown speaks, you make faces. What is this relationship going to be like over the next 19 or so months as you disentangle it? I think a lot of residents are wondering if you guys can actually come together. I don't know if you're going to be there, but if you guys can actually come together to work this out in an amicable way, seeing as how the two mayors seem to have a lot of distrust in one another.
Well, yes, the answer is yes, we will be able to work this out amicably, and I think we have a very professional, very cordial relationship. Of course, we have our differences. We have our differences of opinion as well, and that'll all be evident and unfolded as we go through the audit process, and we've already approved the terms of reference for the audit, and I look forward to opening our books so everyone can see for themselves the status of our finances and our reserves and what exactly Mississauga paid for the past 50 years towards the growth and the development of not only Mississauga, but Brampton and Caledon. And of course, we'll always all be professional as we work together through to the dissolution of the region of Peel. And I know we'll be working very closely with the minister and his transition board as well.
Mayor Crombie, since Colin alluded to it,
I didn't get it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I would just say we're going to be watching this process very closely. And if we express concern, as the stakes are extraordinary. If we have to rebuild our water treatment facility and our wastewater on our own, that's $6,000 per resident. And so we're going to make sure what Brampton has paid in to build this infrastructure, and there's no debate about it. Since 1974, we have built this infrastructure in Mississauga. I appreciate the tone the Premier has set on this, that will be made whole, and no one will be able to walk away from their bill. But let me be very clear, Brampton would never accept our residents being taken advantage of. Every single cent we put in to build that infrastructure in Mississauga, my residents expect back, because the infrastructure has been used up. The servicing capacity has been used up. It's like going for dinner and having one party eat the entire plate, give you the empty plate and say, let's share it now. It's wrong. And it would be unconscionable for our residents, and I will not back away from standing up for the residents of Brampton.
And if I may,
I know that we're the child in this marriage, but the children gets to speak in a divorce, because at the end of the day, the children, they are affected. So we're the child and we're the children, so we want to speak. And on behalf of my residents in Caledon, we are confident that this decision by the province did not come lightly, and that we are confident that we will be taken care of throughout this process.
So that was the voice of Annette Groves, and she is the mayor of Caledon, making it clear on the one hand that she trusts the process will work out, but she also said, we never wanted this. We never thought that it was necessary for Peel to break up. What's going to happen to Caledon? It'll be an interesting question. Does it in fact have the capacity to move forward as a standalone municipality, tier 1 municipality, in this environment? Or does it need the support of a regional government? So, I don't know, does it get absorbed or added to York region, perhaps to Halton region, whatever the case may be? So that's another element here. But it was interesting to hear her conciliatory tone. And perhaps that is her role in all of this. As the child in the divorce, she's going to be the adult in the room. And let's face it, when you heard both from Patrick Brown and Bonnie Crombie, I don't blame either of them for taking the position they're taking. Right? This is real money that has been spent over the last 50 years on that level of infrastructure, on the services, etc. And the degree to which they're going to be able to not just do the audits from Mississauga's point of view, but collectively look at it and say, okay, how does all this balance out? In some ways, it makes the megacity merger here in Toronto look like a walk in the park, as opposed to pulling it all apart. It becomes more complicated. So we'll watch to see what happens here, because I think the dynamic is pretty interesting politically, and never mind in terms of how the place is being governed. So let me suggest here two things. First, the politics of Brown, the politics of Crombie, as it's reflected at Queen's Park. It's no secret that Patrick Brown, as the mayor of Brampton, doesn't have a huge cheerleading section in the caucus of the Progressive Conservatives in Ontario. Not much liked by those folks. He's still pulling knives out of his back after being ousted as the leader. On the verge, he could have been the premier of this province, right, 5 years ago. So there's not a lot of love lost there. And it's still really close to the surface. I mean, you hear folks who are close to the Conservative Party like, Tim Hudak. No time for this guy at all. So whatever inside fighting and, backroom battling that's gone on with Patrick Brown, it's not getting him any currency at Queen's Park. So he's going to have to stand in there and go toe-to-toe, not just with Bonnie Crombie, but with this transition board. He's going to have a hard time leveraging anything, particularly when you come and listen to the salvo. Like I said yesterday, he came out calling Bonnie Crombie a liar. Now, it's emotional, and that's never a good place to start these conversations, but it is, because it's personal for these two, the way it's playing out. So that's one thing. The other side of it is Bonnie Crombie's role. You heard Colin DeMello asking the question, of the two mayors. When you talk, he rolls his eyes and makes faces. When you talk, she rolls her eyes and makes faces. Can you two get along amicably? And he asked the question first of Bonnie Crombie. But his throwaway line that got a bit of a laugh was, well, I don't know if you're going to be here or not, but you get my point. And it's a reference to the idea that she will run for the Ontario Liberal leadership. But that has to be done in the next couple of months to actually sort of set the tone for that, right? We know that her team has been doing exploration. She's been very, vocal about people stepping up and asking her to get involved and that they are exploring it. This changes that. It doesn't necessarily change whether or not she will run. It changes the effect of her running and leading the Liberals would have on this detangling process in Peel. Now, here's the question. Does she serve Mississauga better staying in the mayor's chair and shepherding this thing through until 2025, then running for re-election again for, another 4 years as mayor? Because that election will come up, 2026, right? And if she can do that, she's golden. She could probably outlast Hazel in the mayor's chair from now on in Mississauga. On the other hand, does she have a more potent and important role, a more effective role as the leader of the Ontario Liberals in watching this move forward? Does she do more for Mississauga sitting as a leader of the opposition who doesn't have a seat, let's say? For example, if she wins, she would want to be the MPP in whatever Mississauga riding. Right now, they're all held by the Tories. So having a by-election, not happening in there. Probably doesn't make sense in any stretch of the imagination to ask one of the 8 sitting Liberals to give up their seat for Bonnie Crombie to run. Complete distraction in a by-election. I'm going to suggest that she would be far more of a threat or a potent opponent or a protector of Mississauga and then secondarily Peel, Brampton, Caledon if she were to sit as the Ontario Liberal leader outside the legislature, and she can just target her guns on this big issue over the next 19 months. Her political capital only increases, and it sort of addresses an issue that came up in the question period before Stephen Clark tabled the legislation, question period happened in the morning. Marit Stiles, the leader of the opposition, leader of the NDP, aimed her guns and her first question at the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs.
I get why people are worried about this government's latest plan. They deserve better. In 2019, the government announced a regional government review. 3 months of consultations, and the review received over 8,500 written submissions, but then the government suddenly dropped the whole idea. The report and the recommendations have been kept secret ever since. Just so Peel residents and other Ontarians have access to all the relevant information, will the Premier order the release of the 2019 report?
Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Well, thanks, Speaker. You know one thing that the Leader of the Opposition didn't talk about? The results of last year's election. I wonder why. She mentioned that now, right now, all of those seats in Peel Region are government seats.
Now remember, this is the guy who left the legislature, went to the media studio with the mayors in tow, and talked about how they were all going to work collaboratively together and get along and support each other and make this, the best thing that could possibly happen for the cities of Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. In question period, completely different tone and posture. And I get it. It's question period. But it was an interesting tactic. He knew the question was coming. And that question, the answer wasn't directed at the NDP. The answer was directed at the Liberals. Bonnie Crombie's base of success would be in Peel. Let's face it. She'd be in a position as a leader of the Liberal Party to come up with, I think, recruit some pretty good candidates, particularly in Mississauga, if not elsewhere in Peel Region. Do all of those seats then, are they in play? So what's Clark doing here? Is he just being provocative? Or is he really poking the bear? You combine that with the Premier's comments about Bonnie Crombie when she complained, and rightly so, that the province was going to do away with the development fees, the development charges, the money that developers pay into the coffers so that municipalities can deal with the infrastructure requirements in new communities that are being built around condos or houses. Now, municipalities are on the hook for that. And they keep throwing this line around, we'll make you whole. Well, they just put them in the hole because now they're just going to do audits to make sure that there aren't, efficiencies out there that we should be taking advantage of. So now you combine that and layer that on top of the audit to see who owes what in the detangling of Peel. Boy, there's a lot of shell game opportunity going on there. So are they in a place, and the Premier called her a whiner, and he called her out on it. You start to combine that, and the posture for me says the Liberals under the leadership of Bonnie Crombie would be a threat to the stability of the vote in 905 for the Tories. She would be a formidable foe. So I'm not quite sure whether or not they think that this play makes it more confusing or difficult for her to step into that role. Either way, she has political currency. If she watches from the mayor's chair, and this is all very successful, she can pat herself on the back and say, this was done on my watch. All good. If she can do it as the leader of the Liberal Party and ride it to a new government, a Liberal government, or at least leader of the opposition, that's a success for her as well. So either way, I think that the play is going to be interesting to watch. And here are the indicators I think that we have to keep in mind. First is the appointment of this 5-member transition board. Who are they? And what are their interests? And then the second thing is, how are the 3 mayors in Peel going to respond to that? I'm going to suggest the over and under on this is that Crombie and Brown will have misgivings, worries, express their concerns about who's on the board. While Mayor Groves in Caledon will be the conciliatory voice. Again, the child in the divorce may well be the adult in the room. Lots to watch here. So listen, thanks for spending your time with us on the Ledge, and hope that you get an opportunity to enjoy your long holiday weekend, whether you're working or taking some time for recreation or slugging away on the highway, getting to and from the cottage. I know it's sort of that ritualistic time for folks to open up their cottages and slather on all of the fly dope to get rid of the black flies and mosquitoes. Woohoo! Outdoor life. So, no, but do enjoy it and stay safe. And we will be back in your podcast app, wherever you listen, next Friday. In the meantime, just a reminder, we do a daily show called Now and Next, and we would encourage you to jump in on that as well. Monday to Thursday, we offer that up. We won't be in it on Monday because we're going to observe the statutory holiday. But if you like that, like listening to this, there's more of that. And we kind of broaden out the story structure on Now and Next. But either way, if you listen to either this show or Now and Next, and you know somebody that might be interested in it, tell them about it. Let them know that it's here. And we'd be grateful. Meantime, you can leave us a comment. Leave us a rating if you listen to Apple. It helps other folks find the show more easily. And if you want to reach me on social media, at Dave Trafford, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. So that's how you can do it. Otherwise, you can shoot me an email at hello@storystudionetwork.com. And we'll have the crew assembled and ready to go for you next time we gather for On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics Podcast.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.